bright and early. It's Tuesday morning. It's 5:30 a.m. Any hardy, brave souls joining me this morning? Salute to you, and some of you, all of you, a few of you, however many make it in. But for those who didn't get it live, it's going to be archived on HogvilleNET YouTube Live's channel. You'll be able to see it throughout the day, beyond today. But thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Good morning. We're going to get to a few things. It's a long day for me. Again, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have to either go on really early or I have to go on late, like after 7 o'clock, because I'm out of town most of the day. So we're getting it out of the way early today. We did this. Of course, Saturday was one of those days I had to do that too. So thank you again for being here with me. Greetings and salutations. You can't help but get excited with the John Calipari coached college basketball program. You can't wait for the Hogfather to speak, to give us a new direction to look toward. Something, and it seems like there are times where you're just waiting around and things aren't moving fast enough. But the truth is, once things do happen, it's just so elevated. The excitement, the anticipation, the high level of quality, whether it's recruiting, scheduling, just about everything that he touches. Once you start to understand it, you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So, if you were like, for example, we're going to talk about something that John Rothstein, this I think will be second day in a row, CBS Sports John Rothstein, that we're going to reference one of his talking points. Yesterday, I was utilizing his recent updated top 45 college basketball rankings. Today, we're going to speak a little bit more on what he said in terms specifically of Arkansas and how that relates to the SEC. We've got another update on the Arkansas-Houston matchup in non-conference play. So, Calipari let the cat out of the bag, let the cougar out of the bag, that the Hogs and the Cougars would be playing in the Big Apple in New York City in non-conference play. That was over the weekend. So we got another update in terms of more specifics on that. So we're going to go through that just a little bit. Just basically going over the date, where, which venue. Then I might throw in a little, just something that caught my eye about the date on this. So we're going to get to that. I've got more source information now, a fourth source weighing in on their thoughts about Egor Ryzhov to the Hogs, that buzz that's going on right now as we are on commitment watch. Look, it could happen today if it's going to happen. Could happen, soon, could mean many things to many people. We've speculated the next few days, a week or more, maybe later in the month. Soon always takes on its own meaning, especially when each day goes by and you still haven't heard anything publicly about it. And then we're also going to talk about, since we've kind of already referenced Calipari, and when he speaks, everybody leans in and listens. Word's gotten back to me, a couple of thoughts he had about one of Arkansas's freshmen, which I found to be very interesting. I found that to be very interesting. I think it's worth going over that today simply because we've talked about this player, but not as much as others. This was this is not an eye-opener for me because I cover the kid, but to hear it from the head coach, I think that's what is impressive. And this is not a player that we've talked about in the top 8 rotation. Again, if you add Igor Rezoff, you're talking top 9 with him. But where does a guy like Isaiah Sely fit? Class of 2025, this signed national top 5 rated class. I've seen it ranked as highly as 3rd. Again, 6'7" combo guard. I've mentioned multiple times, this guy can play the 1, 2, or the 3 for you. Having watched him play for years in multiple big settings, your typical high school game, spring and summer, going up against other 5-star guys. I saw him compete against, I think, I know at least 3 5-star players this last high school season, and some high-level 4-star guys as well. Early bird. Yeah, we got to get on the road again. Tuesdays and Thursdays, man, a lot. Not every Tuesday and Thursday, but most of them. Sometimes I have some workarounds, but not this week probably. So we may have to do 2 earlies Or again, the alternative on these days is to do them after probably 7 o'clock, and I just don't want to go that late for some of this stuff. But look, Sely has impressed John Calipari already. Now they've done mostly scrimmaging. They're on campus. The size he's listed, I think it on the official website for the roster, I think 6'7", which is what we've always said he is. I think 200, 205, something like that. But we've always kind of put this in the framework where he's on the kind of the back end of the rotation plans. And we'll see what that means in terms of a projectable role. Right now, minutes and role, we haven't really had one when we talked about this. But Calipari, man, this is from a conversation he had with some folks just very recently. I mean, like within the last day or so. And this is what came out of it. He said about Isaiah Sely, he does things that I can't coach. He does things that I can't coach. And he's better than almost everybody thinks he is based on rankings or, what everyone's talking about, guys like Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas, which is expected. I mean, they're high level, they're top 10 rated 5-star guards. Depending upon the service, they're, almost categorically top 15 if they're not in the top 10. Acuff being the highest rated, but they're both 5 stars. They were McDonald's All-Americans. We understand why, so much praise has been heaped on them. But to say he does things that I can't coach, and the first thing that comes to mind for me actually seeing Sely play a lot, is not just his ability with his length and height and athleticism to see over defenders, but just his gifts as a passer, especially in transition. He's the kind of guy that's going to rip down a defensive rebound, pivot to turn up the court, and now his head's on a swivel, and he will make the right pass and deliver it on right on the money to guys 3/4 court away. Or sometimes when it looks like the defense is getting back and it's not primary transition, he's still seeking a driving lane. He'll do it all by himself and finish above the rim, or he'll set a teammate up again in secondary transition where you're not ahead of the defense and have run past them. Maybe they're trying to settle in, but he doesn't let them get fully set up. So he's got some really good instincts as a passer, really, I'd say plus court awareness. Sometimes some of the plays he makes gives you the idea, 2 or 3 wow plays a game. You're like, man, that's kind of elite stuff. And one of the things when you look at him statistically, especially matching up with 5 stars, it's not always that he's out there, chasing 30 points. It's that he's, either hovering around or pulling down a double-double, whether it's points, rebounds, points, assists, sometimes close to a triple-double. And he just impacts the game in so many positive ways. When you look at his spring and summer play, one of the things we talked about before he ever picked up the Arkansas offer, and what I got from this coaching staff in their first spring at Arkansas doing the live eval stuff was, and it led up to the point where he got his offer in July last year, was that Sely caught their eye because not only was he talented and has length and size, but they really liked the way that he complemented other really good players and played the right way, and it didn't have to be all about him, and he could really mesh. And so what are you building at Arkansas if you're John Calipari? Again, you're bringing in high-level 5-star guys out of the high school ranks. You're getting 2 out of the portal and their quality, mostly frontline guys, and then, various retention so far, other guards and wings. But I think it's certainly interesting for him to say that about this player even now. He hasn't seen him a whole lot yet. They haven't done a whole lot up there. But just his tracking of this player that he pursued, offered, and eventually signed is that he does things I can't coach. And so it's weird to then go back to, well, where does he fit in the rotation? You could say that about a player, and maybe that he's 2 years away from your plans to have him fully engaged in what you're doing and in your rotation. Or you see enough in him that you envision maybe more of a role than the rest of us can see right now, or somewhere in between. Maybe he's like, okay, this guy's going to have a chance to upset the apple cart a little bit and move ahead of some people, potentially. I think the good thing about having a guy like this, even if he wasn't in your initial top rotation plans, when you look at the top 9, is that you've got better quality outside that top nine with a guy like Sely, maybe a guy like Artal in some ways, where they can push the others, create more competition. You never know who, wins a spot. We talked about last year's team. There was nothing outside that top nine that was more than practice buddies and locker vibes and all that, locker room vibes and all that stuff. And so that was understood. But when you went to your ninth man, that was Billy Richmond III, a top 25 rated guy coming out of high school, a composite 5-star, and a situation where you just had quality in that top rotation. And so that it makes it tough to say, based on a comment like that Calipari's already pinpointing a spot for Sely in his top nine. But man, that is heavy praise. I like that. He does things I can't coach. And when you recruit the way that he has, again, he says that about a lot of guys. He talked about Billy Richmond, speaking of the ninth man last year, recently, when he was doing those road shows or somewhere. He was talking about Billy Richmond doing things that makes him one of the most unique players in college basketball. And we know Calipari likes his players, he likes his guys, and he talks it up. But there's nothing wrong with that. And in some ways, I tend to agree with him. Sometimes Sely, gets downhill on defenders, and he rises up, and the next thing you know, he's punching it, and kind of from a weird angle, you're like, dang, I didn't know he had that in him. And he reminds you, yeah, I got that in me. And he'll defer a lot. He's got a nice little pull-up game off the bounce, really good setup work going left or right, using crossovers, tweeny dribbles behind his back. But some of that stuff they'll iron out in terms of reducing some of that at this next level. But you always like that skill set in there because you can go to it if it's useful. And also, he's not a horrific 3-point shooter either. I mean, I think he's a guy that can end up being a solid 3-point shooter at the college level. I don't know how quickly that happens, but to hear Calipari say that about a guy that we assume is outside for now your top 8, and assuming maybe you get an Egor Ryzhov, or if it's someone else, if that blows up and doesn't happen like it seems to be tracking, you're still thinking maybe Sely's the 10th guy at that point. But to hear that about, even if he's the 10th guy, again, it's just, this is not an extra body. In other words, this is not just someone to let's get through practice and let's be he'll be the clap, one of the clapping 5 at the end of the bench, and then big smiles in the locker room, and all that can be true. In addition to a guy that at some point you turn loose. Thank you, Don Nelson. Welcome to the Hill. All right, 13 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Isaiah Sely, I saw him last year at the King Cotton Classic, led Springdale. It's a prestigious event, a lot of high-level players out there. Led Springdale to the championship. Now, they had 2 different brackets. They had one bracket, which was a championship bracket, and they had another set of teams that were just playing basically showcase games. They weren't playing in a tournament type of setting. So Caleb Wilson, for example, the 5-star that Arkansas recruited for a while, top 10, top 5-ish rated 5-star combo forward, that ended up at North Carolina. He did not compete against Sely. His team played in the part of it that was not competing for the championship. But he did go up against Alex Constanza, class of 2026, a top 20 rated 5-star, 6'8", kind of combo forward, as well as Alex Lloyd, a 4-star, highly rated guy that's going to Florida, be a freshman at Florida. We talked a little bit about him yesterday. So he beat those guys. His team beat those guys, and he outplayed the field. I mean, he was the best player on the court. And then he matched up against Sheldon Henderson, who I don't know if he's still a 5-star. At the time, he was committed to Duke. He was ranked top 15 in the country, a big wing, 6'5", pushing 6'6", big sturdy guy. And again, Sely was, stood out in that game. And so, he knocked heads against some of the top players in the country just in that event. And then I think it was in November, I was there. Calipari was courtside. And it was J.J. Andrews and Little Rock Christian, Springdale, the best team in the state at that time. And really wasn't a close game. Sely was in foul trouble for most of that game. But when he was on the court, he was really, really good. I think J.J. Andrews went nuts, 30 plus, and a bunch of rebound, hit a double double, and Springdale won big. But again, that's another top level guy, even though class of 2026, that I got to see Sely match up with. So, and then I got to cover him in the state tournament the last couple of games before the finals. And his Springdale Bulldogs were the hosts for that event, and so I got to see him and do his thing in that. I think I had him with at least one double double there, as I recall. But again, pretty high praise coming from Calipari, from the freshman we don't talk about enough, and we did today. We've spent almost 16 minutes talking about the Isaiah Sely factor as Calipari sees it, in recent wording about his incoming freshman. Who's there? All right, Egor Ryzhov, 6'11", Russian, St. Petersburg, Russia, forward center. You know the drill right now. We're on commitment watch. Let's see where this goes down. I went from 1 to 2 to yesterday. I gave you guys, I have a third source connected with the international stuff that says he thinks he's Arkansas bound. I now have a fourth source who's effectively said the same thing. Also, really good international connections. So a different fourth one. We're adding them up right now. But this guy says, and I'm going to quote him. He says, "It seems like it's almost done. It seems like it's almost done." And so that means almost done Ryzhov to Arkansas. So, I guess that leaves it in terms of maybe there's something more to be done, to get to something more that has to be sewn up for it to be done. I don't know, but that's how he worded it. We noticed yesterday, a buddy of mine just gave me a little clue that his Zenit's team over there in Russia in the VDB United League title game. I guess it's a series. And he was not playing. He was not spotted, I guess, on the bench, or wasn't competing. And I looked it up real quick to see if he was even available in the box score for the game, and I didn't see his name there. So he didn't play, and it's that stage of the season for his team. And the same source, this fourth source, who I just quoted what he said, talked about that a little bit yesterday, and he said, it could be the fact that him leaving being imminent, why, kind of left it at that. So, you think, well, yeah, why play if you're already about to be Arkansas bound or wherever? If it's not, I think it's Arkansas, you're risking injury. But you see that a lot in the NBA with trades. You'll see, and I always pay attention to those box scores when you hear trade rumors. I'm always checking the box scores to see if a guy's available in the among active players on game night when you're hearing trade rumors swirl, because sometimes that's a sign that helps point you in a direction that they're being shelved because they're about to go somewhere else. Now, that's a different dynamic, obviously, but it could have it be kind of a similar factor. Or it could be something else altogether, and I'm speculating, but I thought it was interesting. I told you what the source said. So we'll see. Again, we're on commitment watch for Egor Ryzhov. And, again, I think this whole situation, it's been on a fast track in the last week in terms of the talking point. A lot of Mika Murinin to fill the spot. And Egor Ryzhov makes even more sense because the guy's going to be 21 in August, has played against pros in Europe in a good upper and second division level of it, playing for the same basketball club over there, Zenit. And so now we're just again kind of waiting, hanging out and seeing what happens. I'm going to go live again today if I can. I'll be gone. I'll have to probably do it from the car to do a reaction show. And I've got some other stuff I want to bring other than what we've already talked about, because we've talked about him statistically, what kind of player is, the fit, to patch up and more depth in that front line. We've talked it multiple times about it already, but I'm going to even add some more in there if we get to a point where there's a commitment. John Rothstein, I mentioned this, yesterday we went through the fact that Arkansas is going to play the entire Final Four last year. And we used Rothstein's rankings to go through, Houston, then Florida, and Duke, and then Auburn. Arkansas is obviously playing those four teams. And I used, again, Rothstein's rankings for each to kind of set some of that up. But we're talking about John Rothstein today, more specifically about what he said about Arkansas. And he had a little video clip that he put out yesterday on his. Oh, we got some baseball talking here. Now or never for DVH. Yeah, the College World Series starts, Saturday? Arkansas gets LSU. Do they not? I mean, at some point you're looking at that going, let's reseed the field. Not that you're scared of LSU. I think Arkansas is the best team right now. But that, we'll see what happens Saturday. I think LSU won 2 out of 3 on their down in box, down in Baton Rouge during league play. But Rothstein really high praise for Arkansas in this brief video clip that he put out. And he said he's someone who, when he's looking at how teams who are returning a large portion of their personnel from the previous season to the next one, he always likes to give them the benefit of the doubt, he said. And he goes, I know, he knows that folks like, he says he knows he lives in a day and age where kind of right now where everybody loves the portal ads. And that dynamic of adding people in April and May. That's kind of how he was talking about it. And he says he understands it. He gets it. But he thinks Arkansas, based on retention, and what we always said, that was the home run, was the retention. That was where most of the money was put, is in retention. When we talk NIL, that was what the focus was, and everything else had to fill around that. But that was what mattered most. And so he basically saying, look, I think Arkansas is undervalued a little bit. He's referencing that he's also seeing that retention is very important in what Arkansas has done there. And he goes, I look at what Arkansas's return with, guys that had prominent roles in that Sweet 16 run. And that was the point we always made. We always said, they're not just returning 4 guys off a team that went to the Sweet 16. They returned 4 guys that had figured prominently in that run. So they weren't just guys waiting for their turn the next year. It was their turn last year, and they made that happen. And so I think it was really important what he said there. But he kind of wrapped it up by saying, what he said, without question, Arkansas should be in the initial discussions about being that second place, projecting second place in the SEC behind Florida. Now, I've said multiple times recently, and we talk more about Florida and who they're bringing in, the fact they had to replace a lot of guys in the backcourt, brought back that entire front court. I said, even Florida, with all these high projections, and Rothstein had them number 2 in the country, so obviously first in the SEC, that I thought they had question marks as well. So, but he's saying Arkansas should be in this discussion behind Florida for second place. I agree with him there. And a lot of people rushed to throw Big Blue up there. They went heavy in the portal, but they didn't have as much retention. They did get Otega Owe back out of the NBA draft, an all-league guy, and a great two-way player. And, they've got a Brandon Garrison on their front line with depth. I think a couple other players that maybe didn't factor as heavily as some of Arkansas's guys did in their Sweet 16 run relative to Kentucky's. And then they dipped into the portal. They got some high school talent, obviously. But Kentucky's going to be projected up there. Teams like Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee. We'll see who the surprise teams are. It's a 16-team league. And so I don't think it's as strongly as it was projected coming into the season last year. It ended up even better than we thought. Now it's anticipated it's likely to be the best conference in college basketball again. But I don't think it's looked at to be, last year might be viewed as something in a vacuum. How could it be that strong again? Because it wasn't just the strongest in the country last year. A lot of, the college basketball analysts, gurus, historians think it was the greatest conference ever. So that's tough to live up to the following year, but it's going to be strong. We know that. And I think Rothstein's right. Arkansas should be in that conversation at the top. If you add a guy like Egor Ryzhov, it makes it a little bit better because you've got another body, more depth, it's quality, and your front line now can maybe go to war without feeling like it's playing from behind against a front line like Florida has. Go in there with confidence. So they've got the bodies, the numbers, and all the other physical and size and talent goodies to match up there. So I thought what Rothstein said again was worthwhile talking about today. We're nearly 25 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We're going to wrap up here just by reminding everyone that Arkansas, like Calipari said, playing Houston. He said it on Saturday at his father-daughter basketball camp in the Performance Center in Fayetteville, across the street from Bud Walton Arena. And he said, you know, Arkansas, Houston, we've got Houston in New York City. And we've known for a long time. He's talked about wanting, after last year playing Michigan in the Jimmy V Classic, wants to get back there. All right. So a beat writer for the Houston side of things put out a brief article yesterday clarifying a bit more that this game, which we assumed would Arkansas be back in Madison Square Garden, don't know why we assumed it, because they're going to be in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center. And the game, he gave the date. The playing date's December 20th. So a couple of things here. Last year, I think I mentioned when Arkansas played only 4 high major teams in non-conference play, the last of those games was against Michigan in New York City at Madison Square Garden. I think it was December 10th or 11th. So this game's a little later. If you remember, Arkansas had that big win, the only quality win against a quality team with a pulse in non-conference play, and it was a quad 1 win. After that, they had 3 basic division mid-major D1 cupcake games, 1, 2, 3, stretched out over several weeks, because we know they gap in between those games for finals and holidays, so they don't play as frequently at that time. And then they jumped right into the SEC on the road against Tennessee. This gives Arkansas, one of the top teams in the country in non-conference play, a little later in December and playing away from home, getting out of their comfort zone, so a little closer to league play. And maybe, I mean, I'm not trying to read too much in it. I don't know if that was purposeful, this date, in terms of maybe having a bigger and better challenge closer to league play, or if that's just where it falls. But just because that's the only date they could get it worked out. Whatever. That's cool. And, I've been to the Barclays Center. I did one of these segments outside the Barclays Center in the summer of 2023, because I was in New York City, and Barclays Center is where the NBA draft is held. And you had multiple pro hogs going. You had Eric Patrick Musselman staying in a posh penthouse in Manhattan, where I got to go and do an interview with him, along with Courtney Mims with Pig Trail Nation. We were both there in tandem, covering this NBA draft for several days. But the Barclays Center is just a wonderful facility. I mean, it's one of the top venues in the country for basketball, and certainly that's where they host, again, the NBA draft, have for years. But it's a really cool place. I enjoyed my time there. But whether it's Madison Square Garden in Manhattan, or skip over to the nearest borough on that end of it, and you're right, you're just a hop, skip, and a jump over to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. It's all New York City. So I think it's cool that they've actually going to be in a different spot this time. Either way, it would have been great. Just kind of cool that they've got another little spot to play in. All right, we made it just under 30 minutes. Again, thanks for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. If you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. That helps us out. We appreciate everybody and hope you take care of yourselves. Again, if there's news today about a commitment, if that happens today, I'm going to be gone all day, but I'm going to try to squeeze in a live reaction, and we're going to go a little more even than we've already said about Egor Ryzhov, thinking that it may end up being him today, or maybe it's later and we don't have to come back today. But whenever I come back on, if not today, probably tomorrow, take care of yourselves. Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon.